I'm going to talk really briefly about one other thing because I'm the chair of the elections committee, and I know that that's something that a lot of folks in this room are passionate about. I'm passionate about it too, which is why I asked to be the elections chair. We went into the last few weeks of the session with 3 bills on the table, and that we were trying to get through. And spoiler alert, I'll tell you right now, all of them either didn't make it to both floors of the House, or through both houses, or they were vetoed by the governor and we weren't able to override. And this is the bills that we got done. Before I go into the detail, as the chair of the House Elections Committee, what I am most concerned about, and the reason that I was so wanted to be the chair of the House Elections Committee, is we have a crisis of voter confidence. If you don't believe me, I got a thing here on the table. I'm going to be doing a door knocking day on May 18th. Come out with me and go knock on some Republican doors. The number of people, I'm talking Republicans, okay? Because I'm trying to get Republicans out to vote. The number of people I go to their door and they say, I'm not voting anymore because it's all rigged. Well, I'll tell you what, the one vote I guarantee ain't going to get counted is the one that you don't cast because you sat at home because you're pissed off about 2016, 2020. Okay, that's the one vote that ain't getting counted. So we need to, roll up our sleeves, and we need to get back out there. We need to get back engaged in the electoral process. And so I've been doing some things to address concerns that people have about the election system because I'm trying to restore that voter confidence. I'm trying to get people back out to vote. The first thing is, did you know that we keep, in the state of Kansas, taking ballots for 3 days after the election? 3 days after the election's over, if a ballot comes in the mail to the clerk's office, they count it. Well, they're supposed to count it, but a lot of them are coming in without postmarks, especially in rural counties. And so right now, we're disenfranchising all those voters that we told, yeah, we'll count your ballot if it comes in 3 days after the election, because they're coming in without a postmark. And we're not going to count them if we can't verify that they were cast by election day. So for the last 2 years, I've been trying to do away with that, what they call the 3-day grace period. And it ain't because I don't want people to vote. It ain't because I'm trying to disenfranchise this group or that group. It's because when people go to bed on election night and one person has won, and then they wake up the next morning and somebody else has won, that erodes voter confidence. Even if no shenanigans at all happened, people think shenanigans happened because when they went to bed and all the ballots were counted, one person had won, and then 1 or 2 or 3 days later, somebody else has won. So we had a bill that was going to do away with that 3-day grace period. We passed it in the House. We sent it over to the Senate, and it got sent back to committee. It got sent back to conference committee because one of the senators, frankly, was mistaken about what it did. She said that, well, if you register, you can register the same day as you vote, which is complete nonsense. The timeline, it just moved the whole timeline back 3 days or 2 days. It didn't change any of the sequencing at all. But that killed the bill because any election bill the governor's going to veto, and if we can't pass it before we leave, before the veto session, she's going to veto it. We ain't going to be able to come back and override. So that bill died. The next bill, so we passed a bill a couple years ago to combat ballot harvesting. What ballot harvesting is, these big out-of-state agencies, they use machine learning and AI and a bunch of data to figure out people who don't vote, but if they did vote, they vote Democrat. And then they just bombard those people with ballot requests from out of state, ballot requests over and over and over again, 5, 6, 7 ballot requests until they fill one out and they send it in. Because it's public information who's requested a ballot, and it's public information when that ballot goes out. And when that ballot goes out, they flood the zone with volunteers in these swing districts like my district, and I've seen them out there. Yet the day the mail-in ballots hit the mailbox, I'll be out knocking doors, and all of a sudden there's all these like 20-year-old kids from Lawrence that I've never seen before in my district. And what they're doing is they're harvesting the ballots. They're going to all the places where a ballot request was sent and was sent back, and they say, hey, I think there's something in your post office box. Let's take a look. Holy cow, it's a ballot. Would you like help filling out that ballot? Would you like me to turn it in for you? And, you know, I won my last election here in the 41st district, because it is a swing district, by 3%. But because the fort, nobody, you know, probably only 10% of the people on the fort actually vote in Kansas. And we've got the prison, which, you know, got 1,400 guests of the state that are so not supposed to vote. Half my district doesn't vote, so that's 3% is only 133 votes. And if you can harvest 200 votes, you can flip an election in a swing district like mine. And so what we did was we passed a law a couple years ago that limits the number of ballots that you can turn into 10 ballots. But we don't have any way to enforce that. We do have a way to enforce it, but the people who are supposed to enforce it, they don't want to enforce it. It's the election officers, right? When a ballot is turned in by somebody other than the person who voted that, whose ballot that is, you have to write your name and sign that ballot. And then if somebody counts how many ballots that person turned in, and it's more than 10 ballots, they should probably, you know, tell the senior law enforcement officer in the county attorney, and maybe tell the Secretary of State's office. And that's all this bill did. It was House Bill 2614. It told election officers, hey, you got to count the ballots that come in that are turned in by somebody else. We passed it, but then the governor vetoed it, and we did not have the votes even when we passed it the first time to override the veto, because a bunch of election officers called their representatives and said, we don't want to do this. We don't want to have to count ballots that were turned in by somebody else. You're already counting ballots. There was no time limit. They could have waited until after the election and then done a forensic audit. And if they caught somebody, called the county attorney and sent that person to jail. But fair disclosure, I don't know where our clerk stood on it, so I'm not saying that it was our clerk. Our clerk didn't call me and say don't do it. So as far as I know, she's for it. But some of the county clerks around the state objected. So that's why we did pass it, but we wouldn't have had the votes to override the veto. The final bill that we have was about what's called Biden bucks. So Joe Biden wrote an executive order that said that he wanted agencies that administered federal programs to use dollars that are appropriated to administer those programs to get out the vote in Democrat districts. So he wants, CanCare, which administers the Medicaid program in the state of Kansas, and DCF, which administers food stamps, and all these agencies that administer federal programs to use federal dollars to get out the vote. Okay? That's not what that money was appropriated for. That was appropriated by Congress to provide food stamps or to provide Medicaid for needy people. So we passed a law that forbid state agencies from using federal money for anything other than what it's appropriated for. So if Congress appropriates money for helping with elections, like the Help America Vote Act or National Voter Registration Act, then you can use those federal dollars for elections. But if Congress appropriated those dollars for Medicaid, you got to use them for Medicaid. That's all the law said. I'm going to try not to get fired up. I got pretty fired up on the floor of House. The governor said in her veto message that we were trying to make it harder for people to vote with that law. Which makes you wonder, why does the governor, the Democrat governor of the state of Kansas, who has a $2 million PAC, not want us to enforce a law that prevents state agencies from using federal money to influence our elections? Why might that T. So we tried to override the veto, and unfortunately, we fell just a few votes short. If I have the honor of your vote to return to Topeka and continue to serve you, and God willing, I have the privilege of continuing to be the chair of the House Elections Committee, which I'm going to try to do. We're going right back to work on this stuff. We're going right back to work on this stuff. And God willing, a couple of those Republicans that voted against, a law to ban mutilating children and voted against a law to allow Joe Biden to take our federal tax dollars and put his thumb on the scale. Hopefully a few of those Republicans ain't coming back, and we'll have the votes to secure our elections and restore voter confidence. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to turn it over to Representative Neal.